Welcome to the Enneagram Global Summit. We are continuing our journey with understanding the 9 domains of awareness and consciousness, the 9 personality types, the 9 ways that we distract ourselves from presence, the 9 ways that we forget who we really are, and 9 pathways that we all can take to awaken to our deepest potential. And this is a session on type 7. And type 7, like all of the types, arises out of one of the 3 centers of intelligence: the gut center, the heart center, and the head center. And there are 3, though we all have all 3 centers, and though we all have really all of the issues of all 9 types, there's one in particular, there's one center that we're particularly hardwired for. And there's one temperament that each of us have, of a particular way that we are after a quality of that center, and a way that we forget that potential. So we're doing type 7 today, and type 7 is in the head center. And the head center is about noticing and recognizing what is actually happening in reality, and being able to receive the information, to listen, to reckon with it, and to actually create guidance and vision that guides our life. And so we're going to look at how type 7 reflects a particular flavor of the head center. And we have 3 wonderful Enneagram teachers to take us on this journey today. And the first is John Luckovich. John has been a long-time student of the Enneagram and also the 4th way, Gurdjieff's 4th way. He's also studied breathwork. He is the co-founder of New York Enneagram, along with Julie Harris, and is the author of a recently published book, a wonderful book called The Instinctual Drives and the Enneagram. Thanks, John, for being here with us in the journey of type 7 today.
Thank you, Jess.
We also have Viola Edward, and Viola is the co-founder and CEO of Grit Academy. She is the recipient of multiple awards, including a doctorate honoris causa, aspirational woman, and outstanding contribution to mentoring. She's an amazing humanitarian. She's on the board of numerous organizations, and she's the author of 2 books, Breathing the Rhythm of Success and Who Makes the Bed. Thank you so much, Viola. I'm happy you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here with you again.
And we're also welcoming Sean Palmer. Sean is also an author and a coach, and his book is 40 Days on Being a 3, and a new book that's coming out in March called Speaking by the Numbers: Enneagram Wisdom for Teachers, Pastors, and Communicators. Sean is a teaching pastor at Ecclesia Church in Houston. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you for having me. Honored to be here.
Well, we're all awaiting this journey, and John, would you please begin by sharing with us a way that we can understand and orient and unpack type 7?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Jess, and thanks, Shift. And when I look at the Enneagram types, I try to understand them through the lens of what they are trying to achieve or what they're trying to find, and how we get lost and end up trapped in our own suffering in an attempt to get at what our heart is literally seeking. And so with the 7, there are a lot of really unfair and kind of cartoonish caricatures or cartoons out there about what a 7 is and what a 7 looks like, and that don't really do justice to the struggle and also the kind of heroism that it takes to be a 7, or to really be any type in the world. And so I try to move away from just describing traits and behaviors, and try to look at what's going on under the surface. And so I always start with the essential quality. And from my point of view, the essential qualities are qualities of presence. They're accessible to all of us. And when we are present, we experience them. So in the case of 7, what the 7's kind of heart is like seeking to taste most is what I call essential freedom. And the idea is that when we're present, we're in touch with the present moment in a way that is not limited in the way that the ego normally perceives it to be limited. When you're really present in this moment, like watching this, whatever on your computer or whatever, it's like, if you're really present to this, this moment's different, this moment's different, this moment's different. And being awake to that is the head center in action. It's being awake to the way things are changing and unfolding without getting too calcified. And so for the 7, when we are in this space of essential freedom, we see that there's much more possibility available to us. There's much more that can happen. Things are not fixed. Things are not stagnant. Things are not set in the way that we, through the lens of the personality, often believe them to be. And so as a 7, it's like I feel that is like kind of like the part really close to my heart. Like that is what my being is seeking and hungry for. And however, as we get identified with our personality and we get identified with our instinctual drives, we start to see that sense of freedom becoming conditional upon meeting certain requirements of our instincts. Like, oh, if I'm going to have the lifestyle I want, the kinds of friendships and relationships I want, the kind of sexual connection I want, then that will be the kind of the freedom, and that will be the kind of enjoyment and savoring and kind of the sort of magical unexpectedness that something that sense of freedom brings, that sense of possibility and potentiality and novelty. So the 7, from the point of view of the Enneagram, each type is caught in a different quality of suffering. And these qualities of suffering are called the passions. For the 7, it's called gluttony. And gluttony normally gets associated with eating a lot and voraciousness, but what gluttony really means is it's kind of an inability to know what's really going to satisfy me, right? So part of the, we're all familiar with type 6 and their trouble with inner guidance. When it comes to type 7, they also struggle with inner guidance, even though their confidence and their assertiveness can look like otherwise from the outside. For 7, it's like, I don't quite know what's going to satisfy me. And I don't know quite how to let what I'm experiencing sink in and to savor it and to be nourished by it. 7 has this sense that there is something I didn't get that I needed, and I don't quite know how to look for it. I don't know quite how to locate it. And so I want to try a lot of different things. And there's a way in which also this sense of trying a lot of different things and having a lot of different experiences and a lot of different talents kind of mimics that sense of possibility that of essence of the essential quality of freedom, that like it's sort of creating variety within the personality as a substitute for that sense of potentiality and possibility unfolding in the present moment. So normally through the lens, or excuse me, not normally, but through the lens of the personality, through the lens of the ego, freedom means a lack of constraint on my personal will, right? I get to do whatever I want. That's not real freedom. Often we are able to uncover a more authentic freedom when there is some kind of constraint put upon us. But for the 7, it's like, I want to do what I want, and I want to try this, and I don't want many consequences and things like this. And so 7s can get in a lot of trouble because there is this lack of discernment based on not deeply connecting to my heart center. I want to be clear that like 7s can be very emotional. They can be very sensitive. They can be very heartfelt. And often 7s are stereotyped as superficial or as not feeling very deeply. And that's not my experience at all. I have some 7s I'm very close with that I find very deep feelers. But and the way that 7 is often described is as trying to avoid suffering or negative feelings. I don't find that's true either. What I find to be true about 7 is that they have a difficult time with feelings that I would classify as like limiting feelings, like grief. Grief is an experience of feeling that is sort of, you can't just get over grief. You have to let grief work its way through you. So there's a lot of these more limiting feelings that sevens become impatient with, and they try to move forward into activity, into action, into trying to find a new path. And as a young seven, there's this sense of possibility in the world of like, I can still go out and fulfill my destiny, can still find what I want, still have the experiences I want. But part of the suffering that happens is as I age as a seven, there's a lot that's not touching me. There's a lot that's still not satisfying me. And that sense of how much time I've got to fulfill all these dreams and ambitions and desires and possibilities, that window gets narrower and narrower. And as I make decisions, any decision I make forward is cutting off a bunch of other decisions. If I decide to study like astronomy, that means I can't study biology in the same way, that I have to devote my attention to this thing. I can't study philosophy in the same way. So it feels like cutting. And for the seven in their core, that they're very sensitive to that. That feels like a real loss. And so I try to move forward with it. And I can have a lot of these like undigested sense of grief, sense of loss, trailing behind me. One of the problems as a seven that I can get into is that even though there is this sense of possibility that comes with the kind of an innate positivity or hopefulness, sevens can kind of prematurely reward themselves for their growth, for their positivity, for their, for their good qualities in a lot of ways. And so one of the things I always talk about with being present is that when it comes to being present, it does us no good to reward ourselves on how present we are. We become more present by seeing the constraints we have on our ability to be present. And that sense of continuing to see the constraint, is how we actually know that we're moving toward presence. And so the seven can kind of prematurely go, oh, I accomplished that, I did that, or, I've been really good about this. And that's great. And that's really necessary, but it needs to be balanced with this willingness to see. And that willingness to see comes from the seven really understanding what my heart really needs and wants, and being in touch with what my heart is hungry for. I also want to say that even though sevens are often a lot of fun, they are often very versatile, there are often a lot that they're bringing to the world. Sevens are very good at hiding their suffering from other people. Sevens don't want to burden other people with their suffering. They want to be a light in the world, but sometimes they can be a light in the world at the expense of being a light to themselves. And so that's really important for a seven to know how to give that kind of time and attention with their own heart, that kind of patience with their own heart. Sevens can kind of be like, all right, what am I feeling? Let's get to the chase. Okay, let's do it. Now I feel my feelings. And part of being with the heart is the center that the seven most needs to integrate, is learning to give this sort of unstructured, open, curious, and patient time with the heart. And see, last thing I'll also say is that a lot of sevens trying to get what they want becomes avoiding things that they don't want. And they start to become limited by their own avoidances. And so you can see in that dynamic of trying to avoid my avoidances, I lose freedom. If I can't be free anywhere, then what's freedom, right? Like if I'm avoiding all these things, that's actually not freedom. And so the seven learns to be unconditionally free. They learn to be impartially present, and they learn how to just taste their experience. It doesn't even necessarily mean like their experience. There's a difference between tasting the experience, being present with it, and liking it. They learn to be present without the constraints of like or dislike. And that's how the seven learns to really find that freedom, not out in the world of things, but inside. The seven's mistake is thinking satisfaction is going to come somewhere else. And there's a lot of great things out there, and it doesn't mean you have to give those things up. But learning how to also include what's inside is how the seven really finds that inner life they're seeking. That's all I got.
Thank you so much, John. What a wonderful launch into the seven and into essential freedom. And now we're going to bring on Viola.
Yes, love it, John. Thank you. Really, really like it. So I'm going to get it from there. And I see the seven like whirling in so many possibilities of life when they really know, when they really manage what John was talking about, when they really heal that sense of being fragmented. So I prepared something here. Let's see. We're going to take away what John already said, so we don't repeat. And I would say a healthy 7 is a source of vitality and sincere joy. They have managed to transit their most dark side, and they have chosen consciously to display their gift and live with an attitude of gratitude and wonder. This is something about the 7 that I just love, their awe and their wonder about for the miracle of daily life. It is possible also that we look younger because of the attitude of entrepreneurship, not getting tired of doing, of loving, of learning, of serving others. And that is what I call when we finally have transformed the feeling of being fragmented and dispersed, and we start feeling whole. That's very important for 7. We also learn how not to be obliged to entertain our public all the time, being external public or internal public in our head. And we develop the ability and the capacity to really feel the sentiment and the emotion of sadness, grief, and loss. It could take a long time because it's so painful. Of course, here we're talking about 7, and there is so many other things like let's see if I have time, I'll tell you a little bit about myself then. So I would say also 7 is generous, not only from the angle of giving to others, it's from the angle of generating possibilities for the self and for others. I think this is very important, and I didn't hear it very much out there about the 7. Also, I feel 7 is in love with love, in love with life. Before, I would confuse my promiscuity with love, but now that I'm very stable with my relationship, I fall in love with you. I fall in love with cause. This being love in love is very continuous in our life. And certainly, as John said, freedom is very important. So that search for freedom was a huge capacity to awe and to be reverence for life. And of course, then we learn different methodologies because we're great communicators. In general, 7 have developed their intellectual. Those 7 who have developed their intellect, they have synchronized. I find a lot of 7 that have synchronized the function of both hemisphere, logical, rational, and the intuitive, sensitive in a beautiful way. Therefore, they have like globalized a mind. They have like a globalized mind that is capable of integrating multiple concepts. So of course, their mind go very fast. And because of this ability of integrating concept, they can become great communicator. And doesn't mean that we are in the surface of things. It's just we can go in the area where is our interest more deep because of this ability of speed of our mind. 7 has an exaltation of good mood, is versatile, and also is multifaceted, like a diamond that have multiple facets. Is that correct in English, facets? So in their best, 7 have a beautiful attitude of wonder in the process of learning, and they enjoy enormously not only I enjoy to learn, I also enjoy the expectation that precedes all the new discoveries. So you know, of course, then we are histrionic. We you know, we exalt many things, and certainly you like them. You like 7 or not. It's very difficult to forget them. They're gonna make a print in your life, even if you don't like them. They are exultant, euphoric, enthusiastic. And there is this, I have experiences after I work with myself, so many years of psychotherapy and breath work, and now I'm 62 and a half. And I will call it, if you allow me, there is an innocent voracity in the 7. It's not malicious. It's just like, it's really like a voracity. So their challenge is to learn how to manage their versatile personality, multifaceted, multi-potentialite, many of us we are, their quick way of processing information, their need of sharing information or think with others. And this is where the generosity comes. And their need of well-being, that's a huge need. Therefore, okay, let's say more like another thing I feel from myself and many 7 I have met is that they are great connectors. Maybe that's because of our proximity of the six, but the way how seven communicate, they manage to communicate with you as peer, as a mate. Rarely you will see a seven communicated from a place of megalomania or superiority place. They manage with that level. Seven are neophile. They have these neophile tendencies, love of what is new or love for constant novelty and change. This tendency take them many times to be these visionaries that can accelerate the change because they like it in that way. And this quality is likely to lead them to many subjects outside of the normal area of other people's interest. Of course, the shadow of that can become compulsive and they don't sit enough on it. But I have found many seven who really break the mold. So the other thing about seven is I want now immediately and I want a lot of it. So, and I want it big. So, you know, when we come into balance, I can see it, for example, of myself. If I'm using necklaces, I want many. If I use glasses, I collect all the others. So I change them in comparison of my husband who used glasses since he was 6 and he has only one pair of glasses. So when the point is when I want so much is and I'm conscious, I can want it in areas that doesn't affect others who live with me. But that thing in the past in my life, and we see it in a lot of seven, is what take us to have diverse addiction, food, alcohol, drugs, games, sweets, shopping, sex, you know, whatever gratifies us in that way, because it's now, it's immediate, it's a lot, it's big, and this curiosity doesn't stop. So that is one of the biggest challenges of seven. And personally, I had to go and do recovery from addiction. And, you know, it's tough on seven. And I find many in the path that have gone through that. So one thing about us is we have to be constantly aware and keep working in ourselves to observe our defense mechanism. That way of use the deflection, how we deviate, you know, and the fear of encountering that inner hell of pain and no pleasure, what seven can call the place of no return as a fantasy. So the fundamental sentiment that seven is running away from is the feeling of anguish. And of course, what's happening is, as we know, in us human, the pain looks for a natural slope, you know, natural place where it can get out and manifest to be expressed, so that pain will not be present. And this natural drainage, if we manage it with awareness, it's like a passage that we have to let it be in order not to get more ill, in order to heal, in order to liberate. In the seventh, it is produced that when this thing is trying to go in this natural drainage, there is another line of tension in a very opposed strengths that produce more tension. And the result of that in an intrapsychic way is more of anguish. So seven keep fighting with that. So what happened, as John said it very well, while the seven is trying to avoid the immersion of pain, it make bigger their anguish, and that could become, sometimes can be expressed as anxiety, restlessness, compulsion, lack of peace. Basically, seven, they don't retain or sustain the feeling of pain enough time in themselves to be able to process it, to be able to metabolize it, elaborate it, transform it. So in that way, seven pass very quickly into another action to avoid the feeling of pain. And that means that they become deprived of connecting with their own depth. And that, I think, is the one tricky bit of seven. And once you really manage, use seven, and all of you who have high punctuality in seven or pass from there, when you manage to learn how to go into your depth, So nobody can tell you you're living in the surface or you're superficial. As it's not my experience of 7 anyway. We learn how to go into the depth when we learn how to distinguish. Therefore, the risk is that even though we're very intelligent, multi-talented, if we don't learn how to go into the depth and be sustained there, then we can stay in the surface of things or can be perceived as so. For that is so important, the process of psychotherapy mentoring for all the Enya type, but I would say especially for 7, because we manifest diversity, inclusivity, generating, regenerating, recycling, sharing, communicating, and there's so much wealth in this Enya type that really, once we mature emotionally, there is non-stop of joy, because there is a lot of joy of healing. There is a lot of joy in serving. There is a lot of joy of manifesting books. There is a lot of joy of being mentors and help others that going into those paths that we already went and we healed. And as you can imagine, as a 7, I have so much more to say, but now I will pass it on to Sean. Thank you.
Thank you, Viola and John. Oh, that has been so good and so rich. I've just been furiously taking notes, and just the way that learning more and experiencing more about the types is ever expanding. I can't tell anything. I can't talk really without telling stories. That's the way I kind of move through the world. So I'll do a little bit of that. But when I think about 7s, and really when I think about all of the types, what I want to focus my attention on primarily are a few things. One is what they bring to the world, what each of our types bring to the world, and what's repressed in us that we could be bringing to the world, like what we're missing out on, what the world is missing out on within us that's there. And so I have the fortunate blessing of having been college roommates with a 7, raising a daughter who's a 7, and what they represent to me, what they bring to me when they walk into a room is a great joy that is not hedonistic, but is life affirming, that they bring joy with them in all of the aspects that every room that they enter. But I'm also very mindful that because they bring that joy into a room, that part of my relating to them is to let them know that they don't have to maintain that joy, that they can be real and create space. And this is a little bit of what both Viola and John have talked about in pain avoidance. And so when we think about 7s and them being in the assertive or the aggressive stance, which identifies which of the intelligent centers you're repressed in, and them being feeling repressed, it's very hard for most people first engaging a 7 to look at them and say that that's someone who is feeling repressed, because it seems like that's what they're doing. Like they are we are experiencing so much joy and so much feeling in their presence. But what they're really doing is just limiting their experience to one half of the emotional spectrum. So for folks my age and maybe a little bit older, one of the great characters who represents the energy of a 7 to me is someone like Ferris Bueller. And Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Like, he doesn't want to go to school. He wants to play, right? And he wants to play not just for himself, but to bring that joy, share that joy with friends. And so that's what the entire movie is about, is this quest to experience the best parts of life. And that is because for 7s, optimism is not simply a trait, it's a virtue, a life virtue that they bring to all of their situation, depending on where you live, especially for those in a Western context, particularly in an American context. Optimism is talked about so positively. It's really hard to convince someone who has been raised in that sort of culture that optimism may not always be good, that there are some times. So when my daughter was in the 4th grade, I got a call from her school, and they just wanted me to talk with her because a kid at school, and I don't know if people around the world will understand the weight and the import of this, but a kid at school, another student, had called her the N-word at school, and they wanted me to know that. And so I talked with her on the phone, decided that would like to go ahead and come get her, pick her up from school, and just see how things were going. And so I picked her up from school, and we're walking out to the car, and I asked her about her experience for that day and being called this racial epithet. And she looked at me and she said, "Dad, we don't talk about it." So that is very emblematic to me of the pain avoidance of sevens, and what I owe her in relationship, and maybe not in that moment, is an opportunity at another time to sit down with her and be with her in that pain and let her know that it is okay to be there. And I know that she can't be there for a long time. My other daughter is a 4, and she can be there all day and all night. But my youngest daughter can only be there for a little while. But it's part of helping her bring up the pieces of her that she would rather avoid and develop a mature attitude. Because when sevens are in an immature attitude, when they're in an immature place, they do become all of those things that we've talked about: excessive. They become extraordinarily opinionated. But at a mature level, they are happy and versatile and bring a level of sobriety. And especially when they have the inner awareness about the way that they function and move in the world. So that same daughter of mine, knowing that she has compulsions to live in a certain part of life and not in the other part of life, even at 14, she will say things like, one of the things that I know about me is that I can never try drugs. I can never even try it, because if I try it, I won't be able to stop trying it, like to stop doing it. That's an incredibly mature attitude and awareness to have about yourself. And in immature level, they can become hyperactive and superficial, but at a mature level, they are some of the greatest people to have around, especially when it comes to forecasting and planning. This is part of them being thinking center, that they bring optimistic thinking about future plans. Like a 7 is who you want to plan your vacation with. And then you'll sit back with a 1 or someone else when you do the budget and say, what can we do? But I want someone who's going to maximize that for the entire group, because they want to experience everything. So in 7s, there is this great, what's called in social media, right? FOMO, this fear of missing out. So when my youngest started high school, she decided that she wanted to be in theater. She wanted to be in chorus. She wanted to do water polo. And she wanted a new dog. And we said, there aren't enough hours in the day for all of these things. But it's this taste testing of everything. And she brings this incredible intensity to all of those things. Now, where she misses intensity and care is, cleaning her room or doing the dishes, or those sorts of things that become rote and routine. But for me, 7s are the energizers behind things. And they love to think about future action because they don't want to miss out. They don't want to, as John was talking about earlier, to foreclose the future is an evil against the inward world of a 7. And part of that is because of how they get what they want in the world. And 7s get what they want by demanding security. Security in and of themselves. So when we were first introduced to the Enneagram, and we were thinking about 7s and this idea as 7s as children having to provide for what they want, to look around their world and say, if I'm going to get it, I'm going to have to get it. That's what makes them an aggressive type. And my wife was thinking, like, when did this child ever not have what she needed? And I reminded her, from our perspective, she didn't, but at the same time, we were going through a very difficult season in our work and our finances, and we felt like we gave our kids a whole lot of attention and what they needed, but they could not avoid the natural tensions that come with the ebb and flow of life. And that's where that need for her own security came from. That she was more taken care of than she knew, but she didn't know that she didn't know that. And so one of the places that is a growth opportunity for sevens is the simple idea of moderation. How much is enough? So we talk with sevens, I talk with sevens a lot about intensity. Like this thing for you might become an 11 really quick. Does it need to be an 11? Or is it more like a 6? Is it more like a 5? And how do you moderate that? Because what happens in the heart and the life of a 7 is that positive outlook. That positive outlook is actually a strategy to flee inner grief. Right? So the grief is inside. It's not that 7s don't know that the world is hard, that there aren't difficult things, that there aren't injustices. It's just that outer world, and especially in the future, feels so much better. So 7s are on a journey to avoid being here now. Just to be here now seems, well, boring. Any future plan in the future is more exciting than being here. And so if I'm not going to be here and I can be in the future, and the reason I want to do that if I'm a 7 is because there are no problems in the future. There's no pain in the future. There's pain, there are problems right now. So we have to help one another enter into spaces of moderation and places of love, because as much joy as 7 brings, when they reach a point in life where the pain can no longer be avoided, this causes near catastrophe inside. It's as if blocks have been building and building and building and building and building, and when the entire thing begins to crumble, that's really too much for any person, but it's way too much for someone who has not had a rhythm in life of dealing with problems incrementally. And like Viola said, they just grow exponentially and exponentially. So the coping style of positive outlook has to be married to someone in their relational world who will allow them the freedom to not have a positive outlook. Let's say, like, who you are to me will not change if when you choose to not be positive about this for a few minutes. That I am with you and I am pleased with you regardless of the situation or what you're feeling and experiencing. But what I love about 7s is that childlike heart, and that expression of the grandiosity and beauty and wonder and enchantment of life that others of us lose in childhood, that they're able to hold on to it and see the aura around every star, right? And that is the beauty of being with 7s. And so I think that's my time. Now let's kick it to Jessica for a conversation.
Well, thank you so much to the three of you. This has just been like a treasure trove of insights. And just a note with each one is, John, just the whole orientation of understanding the journey and the manifestations of the 7 as a reflection of their yearning to reconnect with essential freedom. And Viola reminding us that there is this nobility of the 7 around generating for themselves and for others. And also, I think often it is overlooked what incredible integrators they are, and Sean bringing this whole thing about looking at the developmental levels, less mature and more mature, and then reminding us that, part of that essential freedom that John is talking about and the generating of possibilities that Viola is talking about is literally the magic that they bring to things, that they are still holding on to that stardust and sprinkling it about. And so the floor is now open. I just really wonder what would any of you like to add to this romp through the territory of 7, or what's something that you might like to comment on that you were aware of the others said?
Yeah, I wanted to say maybe for that, as a process, breath work is so marvelous for 7, because maybe only meditation is could be a torture for a 7, while breath work is going inside at the same time, following the rhythm of the breath, and then we can still smell and taste and touch, think, but it's like an active meditation with this mindfulness. And maybe for that we find so many 7 in the group. I don't know your experiences in the breathwork training, because it's such an amazing methodology that activate and still like maybe for many of us a little bit of ADD things, help us to be in a rhythm, beautiful rhythm, while we are going to introspection and to go into our depth, like voyaging without any instruction, because this methodology is so free, isn't it, John? Like it's kind of freedom. You just observe the breath, and then I wanted to add that. Yes, for you, John.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, what I would just want to say at the close is, like, I think sometimes the way 7 gets talked about, it can sound like to do inner work for a 7 would be a huge bummer, because we talk so much about avoiding pain, and we talk about all this other stuff that, like, nobody wants pain. And like for a 7 listening, like, oh shit, this is a shitty deal. Part of like getting in touch with the heart center, getting in touch with the 3 centers in a more full way, it does sometimes put a stop on some of the buzz, some of the sense of something getting escalated that is that brings a certain kind of excitement that we're familiar with. But it also can become an entry point to having more curiosity and discovery of ways of encountering and experiencing things we've already experienced and that we want to grow and nourish, and new things that helps to hit us on more levels. And it's not just oh man, I got to suffer and cry and all this kind of stuff. It's like there's actually so much more texture, so much more depth, so much more possibility and potentiality when we're able to experience something with all 3 centers. It's not just a matter of grief and more pain that we've been avoiding. It's actually learning that there are more senses than we knew we had.
John, I'm really glad that you said that about pain, because what doesn't get talked about as much is why wouldn't you want to seek a world with less pain, right? I think everyone was doing that. Like to have a vision for the ideal is an enormous trait to have, and an enormous gift to the people you're in relationship with, whether that's interpersonal relationships or intimate relationships or even work relationships. I would always want someone who says, like, who can actually see pain coming, right? And say, this might not be ideal, and these are places we want to avoid. And we also, I would love to talk a little bit more just about festiveness. And it's not just about like, let's just throw a party, but that acknowledges that there is a rhythm to life. And part of that is to be like, these are the people in my life who actually do want to put out Christmas decorations like in August, because they want to enjoy the festival. So I think that's a great gift when we learn to see it that way. And I really do fear, especially in our educational system in the West, that we've just medicated a lot of 7s and labeled them with a disorder, when what they're bringing to is a fundamental joy to what we're doing.
Yes, and following that thought, really, the other thing is the intensity of the pain. It's like 7 expect that the pain is going to be so big that many times when I feel the pain, I think, oh, that was it, like, because it's the expectation of it is so big. But at the same time, it's intensity of many things. And I always see the spark of joy in my friend's eyes or colleague or student is when in this exuberant thing, I'm welcoming them, not as a marketing way, how I learn things, is the way how I feel it, and then what's the risk of that? That maybe some other culture, when all my Latino come in and my Arab origin come in and can hug somebody. So the worst that can happen to me is like, I get a little bit of push, for the bend of the culture, but this is 1 in 1,000. The rest of it, like, really is so welcome, the warmth and the, I would say exuberant that is really felt. The other thing about the 7, we give compliment, but personally, I never say any compliment that is not real, because of this overview of I always find something that person have as a beautiful and remarkable. So I think there is so many things in this person, in this Enneagram type, like all the other Enneagram type, that we can honor. And I agree with you, Sean. I'm so happy that nowadays there is all these teacher and parent that are really working together in something that they find a lot in 7, which is the high ability children that, they said, no, not to medication. Let's look for more. And sometimes medication is needed, so they get a little bit of resting time. But actually, I'm so happy that you brought that subject too. Yes, thank you.
Well, the floor is open for a couple of more minutes if anybody has any final thoughts.
There is an exercise, if you allow me, an exercise for you, for all of the 7s, and for anybody who has high grade in 7, that we can do. And that is review our most significant people in different area of life. Make a list of their name and ask yourself honestly, if in each case, if there is any unhealthy aspect of the 7 in you that you're exercising with that person. For example, being inconsiderate, taking advantage like a child of what that person is giving you, not taking in account her or his feeling, relating with them in an egocentric way, just looking for your own comfort, your pleasure, whatever. See if there is any way that you can look at these people, and as we 7 say, life is short, like we live only once. See how you can put some more color in their life. See how you can apologize. See how can you make it up for them with little bit more of presence and joy. And then we will be walking the talk and talking the walk.
Thank you so much, Viola. And thank you, John, and thank you, Sean. And just want to remind everybody who's listening that we're purposely having it be that there's one person of that type on each of these type sessions and 2 that are not. And we're really getting to see, I think, the Enneagram in action here, as we see that there are kind of multi-dimensional portals of awareness of how we can come into that place of essential awakeness, presence, and embodiment. No matter what our type is. And so as we come here to the culminating moments of our session, we'd like to invite the global audience to just contemplate with us for a moment the gifts of type 7. In a sense, each type is an archetype that is trying to remind the rest of us, as Sean talked about, of things that we have forgotten. The other 8 types are maybe not as connected with. And the 7 is trying to remind all of us that every moment is just filled with possibility. Every moment there is a spark of a joyful spark of life energy that is really intelligent and really awake and just filled with infinite possibility. And that by being in the moment, by actually connecting with that joy, that generativity, that creativity, we can create or see or become aware of a vision that enhances the quality of life for ourselves and one another. So thank you everyone for joining us.